Today we're going to talk about my stairs render. We're going to talk about Cinema4d, Octane, and the various reasons why I use some of the settings. And we're going to talk about lighting, texturing, how to handle textures, and we're going to just kind of a much more deeper dive into the creation of the process within Cinema4d. This video doesn't cover After Effects or Photoshop. I do that in a bunch of other videos, but this one is going to focus more on a much more intimate level with Cinema4d and Octane. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed to me over the past couple months. It kind of blows my mind that 600 people thought that this channel was worthy enough for them to hit subscribe. I never want to be one to be only about the numbers with subscribers. I'm kind of just about, what kind of impact can I make on the 3D community, and so I'm never really going to ask for anyone to subscribe. If you want to, that's fine, but regardless, I just very much appreciate everyone clicking on these videos and watching them. In the future, I've got actually a lot of really cool projects coming up. I've got my senior thesis film, which I'm going to be doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff, processed through script and production book, directing, post-production, all this other stuff. I'm actually very excited about that. But that's coming up in the near future. Semester's starting soon, and I've got my last semester at school, which I'm very excited about. So hopefully after school's done, I'll be able to dedicate a lot more time into creating a lot of these videos, being more intentional with the creation of my renders and projects, and hopefully have enough time to dedicate towards becoming better. Now, if you look at my stuff earlier, maybe like 2 years ago when I just started out, obviously I have gotten better, but I never wanted to stay in a stagnant state of, you're doing all right. I'm always pushing to become better, to be a lot more along the lines of like people like Ash Thorpe or Nick Campbell, Chad Ashley, everyone at Grayscale Gorilla, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So hopefully as this channel grows, anyone that continues watching and sticks with it can also grow. And let's go ahead and get in it. So here we are in my last project, which is stairs. As you can see, it's fairly simple. If I come out of the camera here, it's actually a very simple project. Just a bunch of cubes everywhere. I think like 3 planes, 1, 2, 3, and a crap ton of spheres. So, and then of course we have a basic lighting setup of daylight and an HDR eye. But it's a very simple project, one that's easily able to be done and recreated. So, I'm going to try something new with using my voice and talking through kind of the idea that I have of this project. And hopefully we can string together a good kind of walkthrough tutorial. So let's create a new project. So something I want to very quickly talk about is kind of the inspiration behind this image. I was scrolling through just things one day on the internet, like my Instagram feed or Behance or something, and I came across this project for TEDx Sydney titles, or 2018 titles, and there's beautiful shots. I think they were using Redshift for this. Let's see, Cinema4d and After Effects. I think they're using Redshift as a renderer, but a lot of beautiful shots, a lot of great concrete stuff. It looks like these may have been 3D scanned, or possibly ZBrush soft body modeling. But this frame right here is really kind of one that took my interest. And I'm a huge fan of finding a image or a sequence or something that inspires you and creating your work from that, or creating, kind of practice work. Because all this stuff that I'm doing is more just for me to learn and grow. And so I don't feel it's not, terrible that you're borrowing images or ideas from people. You never want to take anyone's ideas and credits from them, but what you do is you take their ideas and you change them, you model them, you have your own interpretation of them. And so this, I'm going to show it one more time. This project was one that really kind of struck with me, at least the stair image. I really like the use of shadows and the contrasting lines and stuff. So that's where I took my inspiration from. And I had that on my second monitor and just looking at it, kind of going back to seeing, just getting an idea of the lighting and the composition and stuff. So that was what inspired me to create this piece. So something very simple. What I did do with the project was, I think I created, these might have been really small. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. So pretty small steps. This is right now we're going to start creating these steps. And let's just make that like 100 or so. Yeah. I'm going to draw that back to like 25. Okay, that's fine. And something simple, we're going to clone it. And a linear clone is just fine. Instead of having it go up, I would much rather, let's see, I would need to move the direction back. So let's go ahead and we're going to keep it on the per step line just in case we decide to add more. We don't have to adjust some of these settings later. So that looks about good. And then we just increase that scale size. Real quick, I do want to mention how I kind of get across the viewport. It's very different from something like Blender or Maya. And you can go in and adjust the way to move around the viewport without having to like use these things up here. I feel like this gets hugely in the way of just creating and moving around, is having to take your eyes or your hands from whatever you're doing in the viewport, move it up here, rotate and adjust, and then move back. I find that to be incredibly annoying, very time consuming. So something very simple that you can do, and this is just how to navigate basically around the viewport. You press 1 at the top of your keyboard, and that'll transform your view around. 2 is to zoom in and out. You hold it and then left click with your mouse and then do all the movements. And then 3 is to rotate or orbit around. And so, I don't know, every once in a while to just get close to like understanding what you want to do. And that'll become just a lot easier. Okay. I'm actually going to increase the height a little bit. I think that's looking just fine. I like even numbers, so we're going to do that. Okay. Another real quick mention is that this is not going to look exactly like the original project. The idea is just to kind of go over the concepts of it, get it pretty close to being nearly the same, but more than anything, just cover my techniques to creating some of the stuff that I have in here, some of the reasons why I do some of the stuff that I do, rather than trying to create a complete one-to-one duplication of this. So things are going to be slightly different, but I think the concepts and the ideas are definitely still the same. So one thing I did notice looking back at that is that it's a lot wider on this, z-axis than I thought. So I'm just going to kick that out to 200 and probably crank that to 5. Maybe 4, and that'll look good. So we have our first stairs right here, staircase. The next thing I want to do is create kind of this platform right after the staircase that will have the 2 separate
one's leading off of. So this is the top, and then it continues down into this mysterious corridor, this labyrinth or maze, whatever, idea that you kind of want to have for creating it. And something I kept it in line as far as in Z depth and in Z space, the same as the stairs, but I'll adjust it through the X and Y axis just to kind of make it feel more right depending on what's going on. So we got that, and let's see, to edit an object, you select the object, you hit C on your keyboard, and you can go into this area and select the faces. And I'm just going to drag this guy down because I know he's going to want to be pretty far along that route. Cool. So the next thing, I'm going to go back to object mode just so I don't, make any accidental adjustments. So the next thing I want to do is definitely go and copy this cloner. And I'm going to do two things with this copied cloner. Here, I'm going to actually rename these. Naming stuff is so sweet in Cinema4d and anything you do, because if you name all your things, you won't forget which items are which, and you won't have to waste time clicking on things that you don't need to click on because you're like, oh, is this it? No. Is this one it? No. So we're going to call this base platform or something. And then we'll just something simple like top stair, and we'll call this one left stair, if I can spell. And then I'm going to rotate this guy 90 degrees. And that's super simple, just quick keyboard shortcuts. All I did was select it. I hit R for rotate, and I want to rotate on this green line. So you select the green line to move it, and then hold shift to lock it down to moving at only 10-degree increments, which is super nice. And then let's see, since these are still pretty perfectly, yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, and then we're going to make our adjustments so I just need to make that negative, and boom, look at that. I'm just going to adjust a little bit on this y-axis. Okay, sweet. And now to complete our little three-way thing of stairs, I'm just going to create one more instance, duplicate it, and then just drag them over there. Perfect. So we got ourselves 3 stairs and a little base platform. We might make some adjustments with all of that later, but for now, that'll be just fine. So let's go back to this original project. What do we have? Let's see. We have a big old line right here, but it's not viewable in the camera, which is fine. So let's just go ahead, create that. Let's give it a little thickness of, what, 50? That's not what I want. 15? I think 15 will probably be fine. Cool. And then I'll make it really tall, or tall enough to do whatever. And then there. That's fine. We can adjust stuff in a minute. Let's see. I can tell already that I'm going to want to make this much wider. So we can go in, take that, draw him out, and then because these guys are going to be, these two are the same as far as position goes. Let's see. We can. Yeah, okay. So let's make that one 400. And that one 400, and we can take these guys and and more or less center them, relatively center, or actually we're going to put them right on the edge right there, and then just drag this guy back out to kind of match. And you can go in here and become more exact, and I think that looks just fine. It's going to be covered up by camera stuff anyway. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a camera. So I have a button here that just creates the Octane Camera. You can always go in here, go to the live viewer, objects, Octane Camera. It's fine, just however you wish. I mostly use 50mm lenses just because that's my favorite lens type, and when creating a lot of my scenes, I just typically like going with a 50mm. If I have a scene that I wish to have a different look or mood, I'll change it accordingly. But I think now it's time that we can talk about, let's see, I use the square ratio. That's fine. Since I'm only doing still image, none of the frame rate or frame range matters. So that'll be just fine. We can see in here our image. So talk about the camera. It was Octane Settings. So I've gotten these settings from so many creative professionals, Stu or Beeple, and so many more. I've seen, watch those conferences from, Cineversity, SIGGRAPH, all that stuff. So there's a lot of reasons why people have chosen these render settings. There's a bunch of reasons as to why I do, and the main reason is because I see a bunch of professionals use these settings. So in some ways, that's all you need to know, is that this is just how most professionals do these settings. I think David Ariev he goes through his settings a lot in his tutorials, and they're amazing. So I think I mostly copy his and Stu's. But it's pretty simple. Path tracing, it's going to give you the best result with the best render times. Maximum samples, I'm a fan of 2000 to 2500. I think I chose 2500 for this one. Diffuse depth 8, specular depth 8. And then this GI clamp never needs to exceed 1. As to why it's that ridiculously large number, I do not know. And then I always turn on adaptive sampling. That kind of cuts down the time and renders. I just recently updated to Octane 4.01, so I haven't done anything with the AI Light, light IDs, or static noise, or any of that stuff. I definitely need to do some research on that, but I haven't messed with any of those settings. So this right here is just what I do. I have the maximum sample set to 2500, diffuse depth 8, or specular depth to 8. Sometimes people take that down to 5. It depends on how badly that's going to affect your scene. And GI clamp, never take it above 1. Just because it's unneeded. And then adaptive sampling, have that checked, and I just put that up to 0.05 because, once again, I saw a professional have that, and I'm a sucker for following the pros, right? So that should handle all Octane settings. That's all I really have. I don't go into the camera imager, the poster, the settings in here, unless I'm going to change the environment, but I don't need to for this scene. So we have that set up. I'm just going to do some basic adjustments to try and find a better angle. I think that's going to look just fine. And I'd recommend getting into the habit of, once you find the angle that you have with your camera, going in and using the protection tag, just so that you can't go in and, adjust and accidentally move your camera and, have to figure out the adjustments to fix that. That's a huge pain in the butt. Not a fan of that, and it takes time. So get in the habit of putting these protection tags on if you're doing a static camera stuff. If you're doing motion camera stuff, then that's a different beast. We can cross that bridge when we get there. But for now, definitely get in the habit of doing that. It'll save you a lot of time in the long run. Cool, so we have that. I think the next thing we're going to want to check out is this guy right here, and how we have these line perforations going through. I like the look that it had. It kind of gave a little bit of, angular perforations to this large cube, add a bit of visual interest, and so that's why I did it. So we're going to add a new cube. I'm just going to go into the top view real quick. Just in case you're wondering how to quickly go and see your top, your right, and your front views. All you have to do is hit your middle mouse button on your scroll wheel, and it pops it up there. And then if you have a specific window that you want to get into, like I want to go into the top right now, you move your mouse into that area and you hit the middle scroll wheel button again. So let's go ahead and grab that. Couple things we're going to want to do. I'm definitely know I'm going to want to make it the length of this staircase, just because that's what I did in the other project. And then I'm going to make it pretty tall. I want it to, when in the scene, I want to, let's see, how do we have it set up over here? Yeah, I want it to look like it had been, that it extends out much further than it actually does. So we'll make it a little bit taller, just about right there. And then we'll make it wide, just to, that might be a little too wide, just to kind of finish up the rounding of, just to see, I don't know if you can see super well. Let's see, was it Control D? Is it Shift V? Yeah, okay, Shift V. You can go into the view area and change the opacity of these borders. So this will show you, like, let me change this to like a red or something. This will show you where your frame is. So I have a 1-to-1 frame, and then everything out here is not going to be viewed by the camera. So it kind of doesn't matter, but at the same time, it kind of does, depending, it'll affect your lighting and everything. But as far as in-frame modeling stuff, I only care about that area. I'm going to take that back to black and 10%. So let's see. We're going to call this one right wall. Or no, wait, that's left. Left wall. And then now it's time to create those separations in this concrete wall. Very, very easy to do. Just create another cube. I'm going to actually, if you select the wall and you hit, and you hold down Control as you create an object, wherever the, like, what is this called? The access point is on that object, it'll create a new object in the exact same location. So all I have to do with this guy is shrink it in size. So let's take it down to maybe 20 and maybe 10. And then just expand it like that. And then we can see how it looks within the context of, of this cube. I think I'm going to take it up to 15. That'll be good. I want it to extend out past the this cube right here, because we're going to actually use the Boolean object for it. So let's go ahead and grab that just to have it ready. This right here, so we're going to clone it. I think I'm going to put 5. We're going to move the clone object, and I'm going to just rotate it, is it 10 degrees in there, just to have maybe just that. Yeah, and then I'll add, let's add some more height to that. So, like, I think that should be okay. That'll look cool. That'll look just fine. I might actually, because we can see pretty far down there, I'll take this guy, move it lower, and we'll just increase the stuff until we have something like that. Okay, that'll look fine. So now you're probably thinking, what's next? Well, we need to do 2 things. We need to make this a single object. This cloner, we need to take all of these, make it a single object. So we do current state to object, then we can delete that. So we have all of these cubes. And then we need to take these guys, select them all, and then connect and delete objects. So now it's all one. We can delete that. this is our whole object right here. And we can name it, I think I spelled that wrong, I don't know. Okay, so now we take our bool, we drop in our left wall, and we drop in our concrete lines, and look, we've got separation in there. And it's perfect. It's got exactly what we need. Sweet, that's starting to look really cool. So the next thing that we need to do is create this wall, which is super simple. We'll just go create another cube. I'm gonna go into the top view, more or less line it up exactly like I did. So I'll have it over there, extend it to be something like that, and then I'll just make it really wide. Cool. And then just make it tall enough so that we can see that. And if we look, it extends just past our lines right there, which is great. And now that we look at the in the viewport, we don't see the right stairs, so we can either turn them off and not have to have that be calculated in the render, which is great. So next thing I'm going to do is create this back wall. See, I think we need to actually make that just a tad bit taller because, yeah. So we're going to create this back wall, and then I do have an extra little light on that end just to add some, just to add a little bit of light to this back wall. So I can do that very quickly. It's not super difficult. It's exactly the same thing. We're just going to create that. I'll make it wide, not like that. Not that. And we'll make it tall. And we should be good with that. Yeah, that looks just fine. Okay. So let's go ahead and name the rest of these cubes. We'll call this one right wall. We'll call that one back wall. What's this cube? Let's see. This is actually going to be a negative fill. The material that we're going to use on this object is going to be an, let's see, it's going to negatively, yeah, it's going to be a dark material to add some contrast to it. So let's see, let's actually go ahead and open up Octane. As far as like the renderer or the live viewer, and then let's go ahead and start creating the lighting for it. I think, let's see, I'm just gonna make it just like that. That'll be fine. So there are two different lighting setups that I had in here. I had a sun Octane daylight material, and I had an Hdr Eye material. So I think let's start with the Hdr Eye. Now, I got these materials on sale, actually, from Grayscale Gorilla. Probably ought to. Did I crash it? Okay, real quick, I'm actually going to save the project because I do not like not saving my projects. I'm going to go in here. All right, that's a new project I'm working on. Let's go ahead. Save it in there. Okay. But I'm going to go, let's see, the Hdr Eyes I actually got from Grayscale Gorilla. And I remember the number, I think it was 47 that I chose, just because I think it's a great looking Hdr Eye. Let's see, 47. I think I'm just going to use the small one, which is a much smaller texture, but it still gets the stuff done. You can honestly, what is it? Hdr Eye Haven does something very similar, and it's or has a bunch of free Hdr Eyes, and they're amazing. So, yep, that'll look just fine. let's see. We've got that, and I can adjust the position. I will adjust the position in a minute. But at the same time, we're going to have a daylight. As you can see, as soon as I get the daylight object in here, our HDR eye disappears. And there's a very smart reason as to why it does. I don't know the reason. It just does. But there's a very easy way to fix that. If you select this tag, you are able to hit the Mix Sky Texture, and it'll combine both the Octane Daylight, and if I here rotate it 90 degrees or 180 degrees and bring it up, that is our, where'd it go? This is our daylight sun. And so when we have an HDR sky that has a good emphasis on the sun, what we're going to want to do is actually position this pretty much in that same location. So I'm going to drag it up there, and I'm actually going to, because the Octane Daylight object has a much stronger influence on the shadows. I want really tight and crisp shadows, so I'm going to take the sun size and bring it all the way down. And I think actually I'm going to increase the power to 2. I believe that's what I did. Because we don't see, this looks all blown out, and that's fine. We don't actually see the HDR eye in frame. We only care about the shadows. You can see right now there's the sun shadows right there. But we want the sun to be peeking out through this area. So that's a very easy way to do it. We take these guys, because they're now more or less linked together, we can copy, or we can select them both and then just rotate them. And if we go over here, I'm going to move this guy over there. We can check the rotation of it to see if we can get it to peek through. Yeah, just like that. That's what we want. Have some strong daylight showing through there. That's beautiful. And you can see if you look at the shadows right here, if I were to increase the sun size to, let's say, like 5, it'll start, actually, that's stupid, 30, it'll start softening the edges. You can see right here, it's all real soft and stuff. And there's a time and a place for that, but not in this render. This render, we're going to make the lines really, really strong and hard and cut, very cut. Cool. So we've got our daylight. And the reason I mentioned earlier about that backlight hitting this back wall is because it's very difficult to tell that there is a back wall. So that's very simple and easy to fix. I'm going to put fix in air quotes. I know you can't see my fingers moving, but so I'm going to take this object, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees because I want it facing that way, and I'm going to move it over here in between, not in the cube, but out behind the cube. I'm going to do that, and the way I have it is I have a little skinny just like that, and I had it angled up just to have, give a little depth to it. This is way too powerful, but what we're going to do, actually, I'm going to hit stop on that render because things are getting a little laggy as I'm recording this. We're going to make this an Ies Light, and I have a video talking about Ies Lights, and I can link that below. But I'm going to use, let's see, an Ies Light profile, and I believe I use the scatter light for it. But I highly recommend checking out that video. It talks about more or less a really good secret to getting very realistic lights, or light scatter with these Octane lights. And so I just use that within the render itself. So I'm going to open this back up, and now we can take a look and start adjusting the power. I think I just want it very low just to have a little separation back there. And I think I'm going to take this and make it warmer. It's a very slight difference, but it definitely will be one that's noticeable later. Awesome. So we've got kind of a very basic lighting setup, one that can be adjusted later, but for right now, that's going to be just fine. So I think we can go ahead and start moving on to materials. and I have very simple materials for this project. I have a glass texture I just have the specular material, and I cranked up the roughness on the stairs. And then I have 2 different plaster textures that I actually got from Polygon. They're free, so I'd recommend going over there and checking those out. Very useful, very helpful when creating some of these renders. But that's what we'll be doing. So let's go ahead and start with the glass material. So Octane Specular, I'm going to go ahead and name this. It's very important to start getting into the mood of naming all of your materials. So I'm just going to call these stairs because that's the material that's going to be using. When using a Octane, what do we call it? Specular material, always hit this fake shadows option. There is a reason for it. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's very important that you have that. It'll make the, it adjusts the shadows in a specific way to make them more realistic. So definitely have that checked. And then the roughness, I think I just had it at 0.5, something like that. And then we can just take it and copy it and put it on all of these stairs. And that's what we have. That might be a little too rough. Maybe I'll just take it down to 0.1. So while we're doing this, I'm actually going to use something that I think is absolutely amazing. And it is the AI denoiser that's enabled in Octane, at least until I get the volumetric lighting happening. So the AI denoiser is so great. It allows me to drop this down to some stupid number like 200 and still get an incredibly clean result upon rendering. So I'll go in here, go to the denoise. The time's going to take, 25 seconds to complete. And if you give it that 25 seconds, right at the end, you can see just how amazing the denoising works. So let's see. Boom. I mean, look how clean that is. It's insane how quickly that denoiser works. I love it. It's amazing. Love it. So that'll allow me to, just have a lot less samples and be a lot less taxing on the GPU. But that will change as soon as I drop in the volume. That's why we're going to do that last. Another thing, I learned this from Michael Wrigley, who is just an absolutely amazing art director. I took his class on Learn Squared, and he uses nulls in a great way as a really great file structure. So he has it separated out to all the objects in the scene are in a null, and then the lighting and cameras and all that stuff. And he has a really specific way of doing it that I'm a huge fan of. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop in all of these guys into this scene just to clean up the space a little bit, because I don't need to have all that rocking around everywhere. And then I'll do lighting. You can see that I did not do this in the actual project file because I'm very lazy, and I don't know. It's just something that you definitely, whenever you're working on more professional stuff, that's something that you want to do just to, if you send this out to other designers or 3D artists, they don't have to pull their hair out searching through all of your folders trying to figure out how you structured everything. Let's see. So we want to, I guess our first move is to get these, the plaster materials on. So I'm going to use a glossy material for this, and I have this button to just open up my node editor because I'm a huge fan of the node editor. I highly recommend, if you're just now getting into Octane and don't do a lot with node editing, I'd recommend doing that at some point, just kind of brute force learning how to do it, because So many more programs use nodes, and it's a great visual way to understand how your textures are working. So we have this glossy thing, and I don't know, it's probably a bug, but it doesn't update right. But that's just something that happens. There's an easy way to fix that, and you just go in here and you double click, and well, that should open up, but whatever. So you use image textures, and we're gonna go to, let's see, polygon, plaster. So I have two color variations. So I'm going to use the first one, and then everything else is going to be the exact same. So that's our diffuse color. And then I'm gonna copy this, go in our gloss. I didn't do a lot to adjust these values, except for with the color, and I can show you that in a minute. And then the normal. So there's actually very simple textures, which I'm a huge fan of. Whenever you start using like Quixel or real displacement textures, you can spend hours adjusting just the basic textures. Which, as if you have a scene that needs that, then fantastic, you do you. I just appreciate the simplicity of this specific texture. I already know that the texture, you can see it right here, that's going to be very dark. I kind of want it to be brightened up quite a bit, so I'm going to drop in a color correction node in between my image texture that's being piped into the diffuse, and I'm actually going to increase the gamma to, I think 0.75 is going to be okay. That's a good start. Maybe 0.65. And we'll do that. And then I'm actually going to create an exact copy of this, label it 2, and go back into here, and I'm going to select the second color variation. And I'm going to give this a random number. I'm just going to go back actually to 0.75 because that's already a lighter texture. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll go in and do 0.6. Okay. So let's see. Let's go ahead and start with this platform right here. I'm going to open up that. I'm going to drop in, I want to use the first plaster texture, drop it on there. You can do it directly in the viewport, depending on how crowded your scene gets. That might not be the most genius idea. You might just want to attach it onto this base platform. Because this is a cube, very, very simple on how to fix some of this stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and fire it in here. And it's got that plaster texture, which is great. If I get out of there and I go in, we can just look down here. It's got that texture. It's rather big. I'm going to shrink it down. There's a bunch of ways to do it, but in this instance, I'm just going to drop this down to, I think, 45%. And that should be okay. Let's see what this is. It's looking all right. I might go into the lighting and take that down to 1. Okay. This is looking a little stretched. So what we can do is go in here and I think is it this one? No. I'm going to adjust that. It's this one. We're going to kind of scrunch it down a little bit. 35 should be fine. And that just looks a little more not stretched. That looks good. Okay. Let's see. And then it's essentially the same thing to this back wall right here. I'm just going to drop in the plaster. And see, you can tell right now it's very dark. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm actually going to take these guys. I'm going to go 50. Maybe that'll be a good number. I'm going to go in here again, go to that color correction node, and I'm going to brighten it way more. I just want a very light dirt attached to this concrete wall. Nothing too crazy, and I think that's actually going to look just fine. I think it's really tall, so I might want to shrink this. Maybe, is that going to be too much? Is it going to repeat too much? Nah, that looks fine. Okay. So next, I actually may want to, let's see, adjust the tiling, I think. It's like offset, maybe. Let's go with 15%. So I'm going to do what I want. Maybe 35%. Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. So next we're going to, let's see, apply this texture back here. That's going to be just that. And once again, it's very dark. So let's go into the diffuse and start adjusting this. I think that like that's probably going to be okay. We can even bump the contrast, honestly, to make it a little more, you know, make those dark spots stand out just a tad. So if we push it real hard, it'll, yeah. So if we push it real hard, it'll be like that, which we don't want to do. So we're just going to drop that back, increase the brightness. I think that'll be just fine right there. Okay, so we need to figure out how to handle this fancy object right here with the Boolean. So it's one thing to drop the plaster on top of it. And that's exactly what we're going to do, because that's perfect. That actually looks really good. I don't think we need to adjust it, honestly. I think that adds enough variation to the sides to make it just fine. We might shrink it down just a tad. Let's go make it like 75 and 75%. Cool. I do remember what I did with the normal map. I actually increased the power. So I'm going to do that real quick to maybe 2, just to have a little more bump in here. So we can see the light playing with the concrete just a tad bit more. I did want to do that. So awesome. We got all of our materials set in place. I do want to show you the difference between using a negative fill, and this comes in from like photography. So negative fill on this panel right here. So let's go ahead and store render buffer so we can compare the scene. And I'm going to create just a diffuse layer, and I'm going to double click here and turn off the diffuse so it's completely black, and boom. So you can see already this adds some interesting darkness to it. It adds a really nice contrast because, and so before with the basic just no texture on it, there's still light that's being bounced from that wall onto these other objects and then hitting the camera, and that's how we can see them. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to have a little more contrast to it, and so that's why I used the negative fill right here, is to kind of take away that bounciness and make it look a little more like this is kind of like going underground and everything, which I really wanted to do. So perfect. Now we're going to, let's see, we're going to undo that. I do want to add a little negative fill back there behind this wall, because that's a little too much light wrapping around. So that's going to be simple. I'm just, instead of that, let's see, I'm just going to do that. Negative Z, negative X. Move it over here. I think we can save a little bit on calculations. We'd only need the segment to be like that, which is not all that big. So 1 to 1, and then I'm going to stretch that over there. Looks like that will be okay. And then let's go ahead and drag that object over there. And that adds some contrast. Now it looks like it's still going down into some sort of tunnel, and there's a little artificial light popping through there. So that adds some depth to it, which is really nice. So now they have all of that. Let's go ahead and start figuring out what to do with these spheres. So I'm going to cancel that render and collapse these scenes so that we can work on these spheres. So, and actually, I'm also going to turn off those lights so we can see everything more clearly. So let's go ahead and start grabbing a sphere. So we're going to grab this guy. I just want to make it icosahedron because I like triangles, and I don't need to render it perfect. I'm actually going to drop the subdivision, or the segments, down to 12. So there's a couple things we need to create. We need to create the sphere that we have, we just did that. And then we also need to create a containment kind of cube type object that we can clone all of these spheres onto and have it just be in that area, because I don't want to let me make this way smaller. Let's make it 15. I don't want to clone it, in like a grid and then have to try and, let's see, get this to like 5, 5, 5, extend out, and then hope that whenever we attach this thing that it'll work well. Nah. What we're going to do, something a little more direct, we're going to create kind of a containing cube and just copy the instances onto there. So I have my cube. I'm going to bring it to the top of these stairs. Just have it right there. And then I'm going to edit. So hit C, go into face mode, and I'm going to extend out this face to the end of the stairs. I'm actually going to extend that, or actually, let's just do that, extend that up, and I'm going to do the same thing over here, extend that up, and then copy this guy and move it to the end right there. So this is going to contain all of our spheres. So that's awesome. So what we do with these spheres, we're going to put that in a cloner object, change the mode to object, and we're going to select this cube. I'm actually going to change it to boom. Sweet, that's fine. I'm just going to drag that below there. So now we can see it's copying on this cube, which is exactly what we want. It's not just in walls, it's doing just fine. I'm going to change that to volume because I want it to be inside of the cube. And we can crank this. I think I use probably like 50 or 60, something like that. The way that Cinema4d is now, it uses objects way better. It's actually really awesome. Sweet. So we have those all in there, and what we can do to hide this object is actually very simple. We don't want it in there, so we're just gonna turn off these stoplights, and yet it still contains these objects in here, which is great. Now, if we go into our camera, wow, look at all these spheres, looks fantastic, but they're all the same size. We don't want that. We want some variation to it. So we're going to add some variation with the random effector, and have a little option to add it right there. You can go into mode graph, go to effector, and find it right there. Just because I use it so much, I'm just going to do that. If you have your cloner object selected, you can just go into the effectors. If you have it already selected and you hit the random and you create a new mode graph effector, it will automatically add it to the effectors list, which is great. So we're going to go in here. It adds the position. We don't need that. I don't care about that. We just want the scale, not the rotation, the scale. I'm going to make it a uniform scale, and I just use a value of 1. I find that to be fairly easy. And then I very much like having the habit of just changing the seed to whatever, because I don't know, it just adds some randomness to it, which is always really good. Sweet, I'm actually going to adjust this guy a bit. I think he's a bit tall. So we're going to go in here and kind of do that. That'll be okay. We can hide him again. There we go. So now we can see these guys. Looks like it's coming down. Okay. What's next? Okay, we're gonna also want to subdivide it. So I'm going to take the whole cloner. I'm going to hold Alt, hit this guy, and it's going to subdivide everything. And I think just a level of 2 is going to be just fine. Yeah, that's going to be great. So now we have our spheres. So let's go ahead and drag that into the scene, hide it. Now look at our scene. It looks absolutely picture perfect. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to turn on the lighting all again. We're going to check it one more time in Octane. See how it looks. Wow, that looks amazing. So let's go ahead and grab the material for these spheres. It's actually very simple. If you have yourself an Octane account, you could go open the live database, and in here is actually a whole crap ton of already made materials, and it's fantastic. It's amazing. I think, what did I go with? You know what? I might have actually made my own. Okay, we can cover this in a different video. But I made my own. So I'm going to name these spheres. I'm going to go into the node editor because I like the visual way of looking at the nodes. And I'm going to add a scattering medium, and I'm going to add 3 instances of the RGB spectrum. Put it in absorption, scattering, and then transmission. Scattering, we're going to change this to density. I think we can actually make it like 15 and get away with that. I'm going to make it more of a fleshy orangey color. So I'm going to bring that color over there. I'm going to continue that down this line of RGB spectrums. So this video is already getting really long, so I'm going to try and speed it up a bit. Roughness, I think I just had that at 0.1. Didn't need much more than that. And then I went ahead and created a new instance of a glossy material, and just name it that. And I think I changed it to be a little more on the orange side as well. Yep. And then I created a Octane mix material, and I mixed these two materials together. And I'm going to select the subdivision surface. I'm going to drop it on there. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to pull up the float and open up here. And this is going to allow us to move much more towards the is that the solid? Yeah, this is our, yeah. Okay, you can tell that where is it, medium, that it's way too, I'm gonna go with like 0.01. Maybe 1. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back into the mix material and change this float texture to kind of add a little bit to the inside. Awesome. That's starting to look really cool. Fantastic. So what's the next step? Next step is let's go ahead and add that volume. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that render. I'm going to add the volume material or object. I'm going to increase this to 100 because if you start to increase the size of this guy and it's too small of a number, your scene will crash when you try to render it. That is a fact, Jack. So let's go ahead and I'm going to make it that. I'm going to actually get out of the camera so we can see the scene. I'm actually going to make it a little bit bigger than that. Let's go with 2500. 2500. I just want to be able to cover the camera as well as everything else in the scene. And let's go and make that 1000. Yeah, it might be too small. Let's make that 1500. Yeah, that looks fine. Looks just fine. Cool. So we can see nothing, and we can hide that. So this is still going to be active. We just hid it in the viewport. So now this is where Octane is going to kind of chug a bit. So the first thing to do is go into the medium tab. There are two things that I always do. I always go to the absorption. I change this to be perfectly white. And I do the exact same to the scattering. And in this instance, I believe I changed the scattering phase to 0.8. That was based off of another David Ariev tutorial. That's amazing because he's amazing. There we go. So now we can see it's denoising, or it's adding the fog in here. And we're just going to dial this kind of back quite a bit. That's starting to look okay. Yeah, it gives a little depth to it. Now you can see there's not a lot of color variation in it. And that's going to come in through the camera imager. And I like going in here, choosing these Ektachrome presets. So that's a good one right there. Can't remember which one exactly I used. I think it was that one, actually. I think that's the one I used. Yeah. So these are kind of the last steps that I tend to have in the creation of these renders, is the volume and then the post-processing, image adjustments, and all that. Let's go and create this depth of field stuff. So I'm going to turn that off, actually. The image is actually looking pretty cool. I like the look that it gives. So we're going to do a couple of things here. Let's go into the thin lens tab of the Octane camera. I'm going to have my focus be right on the center-ish of this platform. That's where I want people to look, so I'm going to focus there. I'm going to take that off just in case. And I'm going to turn off autofocus because you don't need that. I'm going to change the aspect ratio to 2 and then 3 because that gives us a little more of a like anamorphic look to the bokeh. And then I'm going to go for an f-stop of, I don't know, 1.2. Let's see how that looks. That might be a bit much because of the scale of the scene. It's looking okay. Let's just take that up to 2. I think 2 is going to be a good number. So that'll add you this depth of field. And then the scattering is going to be real nice, real clean. It's going to look great. I might actually go in and adjust the... I don't know if I want that one. Should I go with this one? No, that's real purple. I kind of like that one. I don't want the neutral response because it's going to be a bit too blue for my liking. That's fine. And I can even actually bump up the camera gamma just a bit. I think that'll be okay. Ooh, oh, never mind. I don't want that. Maybe 1.5. Okay. I like adding this hot pixel removal. I think that's good. I don't do any custom LUTs in here. I always do that in After Effects. Post-processing, thin lens, blah, blah, blah. That's looking good. Okay. I may go in here and actually adjust this and bring that to 0.9. I might change the scene quite a bit. Let's give it a second. I might drop it back to 0.85. Okay. We'll roll with that. So, I'm not actually going to go into my process for After Effects. This is just, this video is just going to be dedicated towards the creation, because it's such a long video already, the creation of my stuff within Cinema4d. And I have other videos that kind of deal with the post-processing side, the compositing side, and After Effects. So this one's just going to be dedicated toward the creation, my thought process in Cinema4d. And then, let's see, that's starting to look pretty good. So let's just go ahead and cover output settings. So because the AI denoiser with volumes is not quite as good without, I'm going to increase the samples back. And then let's go ahead and go into our render passes. I always use render passes. Excuse me. Want to enable them. These settings I got from Stuzor. I want 32-bit, save the beauty, and I haven't integrated linear workflow yet. I'm still experimenting with how that works on my end and the projects that I create. But at some point in the near future, if I start shifting over to a linear workflow, I'll definitely make a video on that. But going into these render passes, I'm gonna go ahead. We want to save the raw and the post, and this will pop up here. Mouse is kind of unresponsive, but it'll pop up here. The look of all of these. So that's our post. We may increase that a little bit later. We're going to go into, not the render layer, we're going to go into info passes and get ourselves our good old friend Z-depth. Let's go ahead and hop in here. I've never needed to go above 128 samples. I just never needed to. So, and what we can do, what we want for this Z-depth pass is basically increasing it so that our farthest object is just around white. It's not pure white, but it's close. And then our closest objects are going to be darker. And we can go ahead in After Effects and just use like a levels adjustment and make the contrast much more prominent. But as of right now, this is going to be just fine. This is exactly what we need. We actually don't want it to be, in a perfect world, we would want the farthest to be just barely not white, and then the closest thing to be just barely not black, so we can go in and adjust things later to our liking. So this is looking just fine. Like I said, you can adjust this in After Effects with a very simple levels curve. And it looks like we're all set to go for all of our render passes. I remember now that I wanted to increase the sunlight back to 2. And that's going to add a lot more light into the scene, which I'm a fan of. I do enjoy light. And that's going to be good. I might actually go back to this 400x. Yeah, that looks good. And I'm going to drop that down to 1. Cool. So that is my process in creating my renders in After Effects. And this is the stairs render that we did. This video is very much an experimental one for the channel. I don't really use my voice a whole lot. And this is just, I've been getting a lot of requests of, hey, you should talk about the videos. Why do you do some of the stuff you do in Cinema4d? And why do you use some of the settings in Octane? And so I decided to take this opportunity and talk about that, or use my voice in this way. If you don't like it, please let me know. I can go back to the non-talking, just real quick, just complete walkthrough of all the renders that I do. But if you do like it, please let me know as well, so I can kind of create a much more cohesive and hopefully quicker video, just because this is really, really long. And they don't need to be this long. I remember being like, wow, is that video really an hour long? And yeah, I don't want that to be for this channel, but it could be. I don't know. It depends on what everyone likes. So thank you for stopping by. Thank you for watching this channel. Thank you really for all the people that have reached out to me. I've gotten a lot of really amazing feedback, and it's incredibly motivating. And I just want to thank everyone that really likes the stuff that I do, and is really inspired by the stuff that I do. I have a very strong passion for 3D, and it's one that kind of came out of nowhere, but one that I'm very strongly pursuing and hopefully getting better. And I hope that with these videos of me explaining my process and learning and taking what I've learned from professionals, and hopefully sharing it with all of you guys, whatever level you are, hopefully we can kind of create kind of a strong community of dialogue of, hey, what did you do for this? Oh, that's amazing. What are your thought process on this and all this other stuff? So that's kind of the goal that I want to have for creating for this channel. And it's been growing pretty crazily. I never thought that I'd get this many subs, and I'm at 600, which is insane in my mind. So thank you everyone that have been subscribing. Thank you everyone who has been watching. I think that's even that's more important than the subscribing. A subscriber number really is just a number, but those that watch the video and those that kind of give response of like, hey, this is good, or hey, you got to work on this with the creation of your videos. I think if you spend more time working on, saying less ums, so's, and being more explanatory in your talking through stuff, that probably, yeah, anyway. So thank you once again, anyone watching this. This is a really long video, kind of one that I don't know if it's something that people like, we can continue with. If not, that's totally fine. We can go back to, or we can change the format of the videos, whatever is best for everyone. That's what I would like to do. So once again, I'm gonna say it a billion more times. Thank you for watching this and for getting to the end. I'm incredibly grateful, and hopefully, as 2019 begins and continues, I'll be able to do a lot more content, do a lot more creative work, and share my process and stuff with all of you guys. So thank you once again, and see you later.